Uh, let's let me teach you something called the neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are very many in the body, and we want to talk about them each and every neurotransmitter in the body. And David7 Theater at gmail.com. We are majorly gonna talk about how the neurotransmitter exist, where you can find them, the roles they play at that place in the body, and you will enjoy the video. David7 Theater. Oh yes, that is it. David7 Theater. You can contact us by adding at gmail.com, and don't forget to like our channel, subscribe for more and better videos, and please share to fellow students to also enjoy abroad and everywhere in the world. Yeah, okay, let's talk about neurotransmitters. And first, neurotransmitter are chemical substances which are responsible for transmission of an impulse through a synapse. All right. So chemical synapses use neurotransmitters to transmit the impulse from one neuron to another. And the criteria for any substance to be a neurotransmitter: one, should be synthesized by presynaptic neurons and stored in vesicles. Alright? Two, the neurotransmitter should be released on stimulation of the nerve. If I just get electricity and I stimulate that nerve, I should get out a neurotransmitter. The third criterion is that a neurotransmitter travels a very small distance between presynaptic membrane and postsynaptic membrane. That is called the cleft. Traverses the synaptic cleft, diffuses through the synaptic cleft. All right. The fourth criterion: a neurotransmitter is associated with an enzyme or enzyme system for its inactivation. After its activity, this neurotransmitter should be inactivated by an enzyme it associates with. And this is very important to avoid continued stimulation. 5. A neurotransmitter, when applied extrinsically, should mimic the effects of nerve stimulation. If I just inject or if I just introduce it into the body, its activity should mimic that produced by the presynaptic nerve. Okay? And a drug which modifies the response to nerve stimulation should also modify the proposed transmit action in a similar way. That is the sixth criterion. And a drug which modifies the response to nerve stimulation should also modify the proposed neurotransmitter action in a similar way. Alright, let's continue. We have neuromodulators and neuromediators. What's the difference? Look at this. Neuromediators or neurohormones are synthesized in neurons and poured into bloodstream through terminals resembling synapses in structure. Are also poured into cerebrospinal fluid or into intercellular spaces to influence other neurons in a diffuse manner. Those are neuromodulators or neurohormones. Now, the neuromodulators, for them, they are associated with synapses but do not influence synaptic transmission directly, but influence the effects of the transmitters or effects of neuromediators. What am I meaning? Several peptides in the nervous system probably act as neuromodulators. For example, substance P, vasoactive intestinopeptide, VIP, somatostatin, cholecystokinin, and many others. This is produced by the GIT mucosa of the duodenum. Yes, produces the cholecystokinin and many others. All of these are neuromodulators. They do not influence synaptic transmission directly by the influence effects of transmitters or of neuromediators. Those are neuromodulators. Neuromediators are the neurohormones and are synthesized by neurons but poured into bloodstream. Okay. If we talk about biochemical classification of neurotransmitters, you'll find that we have small molecule neurotransmitter. These act rapidly and cause acute response. They are synthesized and packed into synaptic vesicles in the axon terminal, or call it a bottom. or presynaptic knob. They are packed there. With the biochemical classification, we said we have small molecule neurotransmitters. Two, and this will include acetylcholine, biogenic amines, for example, catecholamines, name it epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, what they call 5-hydroxytryptamine, and histamine. All of these the biogenic amines are also small molecule neurotransmitters. Three have amino acid neurotransmitters. This will include GABA, or call it gamma aminobutyric acid. We have glycine, glutamate, and aspartate. All these aspartic acid and glutamic acid, all these amino acid neurotransmitters, but they fall under the category of small neural molecules. Okay, so we have neuropeptide transmitters. The first one was small molecule. The second one is a neuropeptide. Neuropeptide transmitters are slowly acting and have prolonged effect, and they include neuroactive peptides, have peptides from pituitary gland, we have peptides acting on the gut and brain, and we also have neuropeptides from other tissues. Okay, so these four neuropeptides are also transmitters. Let's continue. Physiological classification, that has been biological. Now the physiological classification gives us only excitatory neurotransmitters and inhibitory, depending on the effect of the transmitter after crossing and binding, after crossing the cleft and binding on the receptors on the synaptic membrane. So let's begin by cholinergic neurons. Nerve endings at the neuromuscular junction, those are cholinergic neurons. So I'm going to mention a couple of them, the cholinergic neurons we have in the body. One are nerve endings at the neuromuscular junction, neurojunction. Two are the preganglionic parasympathetic nerves, preganglionic parasympathetics. Three are all preganglionic sympathetics. The other ones have been preganglionic parasympathetics. These ones are all preganglionic sympathetic nerves, and all postganglionic parasympathetic nerves are cholinergic. Alright, let's continue about cholinergic neurons. Postganglionic sympathetic nerves to the sweat glands and skeletal muscle blood vessels are cholinergic. Not all sympathetic postganglionic are cholinergic, but only those to sweat glands and those which innervate the skeletal muscle blood vessels. All of them sympathetic vasodilator nerves. Okay. So also endings of some amacrine cells of retina are cholinergic neurons. Okay. And then cerebral cortex, thalamus, and forebrain nuclei, specifically released by large pyramidal cells and many neurons of basal ganglia, also are cholinergic. So acetylcholine is specifically released by large pyramidal cells and many neurons of basal ganglia. Okay. Also, cerebral cortex, thalamus, and forebrain nuclei have cholinergic neurons. All right. So that has been cholinergic neurons. We want to talk about its actions. Acetylcholine is very quick in action, and in most instances it is excitatory. It produces the excitatory function of a synapse by opening the ligand-gated sodium channels. Alright? Ligand-gated, when it binds, sodium channels do open. At a very few places, like the vagus supplying the heart, acetylcholine acts as an inhibitory neurotransmitter. At the vagus, cranial nerve 10, alright? Supplying the heart. Alright. Role of acetylcholine in the brain or in the functioning of the brain. 1. Both muscarinic and nicotinic receptors are found in the CNS, however, mostly muscarinic receptors are found in the CNS, central nervous system. The release of acetylcholine in the cortex is proportional to the level of cortical excitability, being increased by a variety of convulsions and decreased by anesthesias. So, in anesthesia, release of acetylcholine is reduced. Convulsions, they excite the cortex, so they increase release of by increasing release of acetylcholine in the cortex. All right. Acetylcholine has a role in memory and malfunction in Alzheimer's disease. We saw this in memory. So acetylcholine, if it is deficient, Alzheimer's can come. Alzheimer's disease can come. All right. Cholinergic projections are also involved in motivation, perception, and cognition. All this is occurring in the brain. Acetylcholine playing a role in motivation, perception, and cognition. Basal ganglia and the pontogenitulo-occipital system for rapid eye movement also have cholinergic cells. Okay? Cholinergic neurons in reticular formation are involved in attention, call it wakefulness, all right, or alertness. Now we've gone to adrenergic neurons. Adrenergic neurons are which either secrete epinephrine or norepinephrine at their nerve endings. Those are the ones we call adrenergic neurons. And the epinephrine is produced almost exclusively in the adrenal medulla, the small amount being synthesized in the brain. Okay? And norepinephrine is released by several sites and is released by adrenal medulla and the following nerves, noradrenergic nerves. Adrenergic nerves are in the next slide. Look at this. We have postganglionic sympathetics, receptors those supplying sweat glands and blood vessels of skeletal muscles, which we've seen being supplied by cholinergic neurons. Okay? The postganglionic sympathetics are noradrenergic, except these two. Then we have neurons of cerebral cortex and hypothalamus. They are also noradrenergic neurons there. Then we have noradrenergic neurons of the pons and medulla oblongata, i.e. locus cellular system and the lateral tegmental system. These two systems use norepinephrine as the neurotransmitter. Let's continue. Functional role of norepinephrine in the central nervous system. 1. Because it is excitatory, it is believed to be involved in dreams, arousal, and elevation of mood. Therefore, the drugs that increase extracellular norepinephrine in the brain elevate mood, and depression will be caused by the drugs that decrease norepinephrine in the brain. Okay? Let's continue. Noradrenergic neurons of the hypothalamus are involved in the regulation of the secretion of ADH, oxytocin, and hypothalamo-hypophysiotropic hormones. Okay? These are noradrenergic neurons of hypothalamus. Secretion of ADH for autoregulation and diuretic hormone, oxytocin for contraction of uterus and during relaxation, and hypothalamo-hypophysiotropic hormones. All this requires norepinephrine. And noradrenergic neurons suppress STH secretion by inhibiting the activity of neurons, which synthesize and secrete corticotrophin-releasing hormone. So when these noradrenergic hormones are activated or stimulated, they will suppress secretion of adrenocorticotropic hormone. This one is responsible for producing of hormones of the adrenal cortex. All right, for example, cortisol and the like. So when it is suppressed by activation of noradrenergic neurons. This do it by inhibiting synthesis and secretion of corticotrophin-releasing hormone by the hypothalamus. This is released by the basophils of the adenohypophysis. Okay. Norepinephrine is an inhibitory transmitter in the thalamus. Is an inhibitory transmitter in the thalamus, cerebral cortex, and cerebellar cortex. This is another function within the brain. Okay. So we are free now to talk about dopaminergic neurons. Dopaminergic neurons have their cell bodies in the midbrain. They project from substantia nigra. This is their origin. We have cell bodies in the substantia nigra, and now they are projecting to the stratum. These are nigrostriatal fibers, to the olfactory tubercle, to the nucleus accumbens and limbic system area. So if you look at this here, you can see that if I have nucleus accumbens here, this is the hypothalamus, this is the striatum, this is substantia nigra, cingulate gyrus, frontal cortex, cerebellum, and ventral tegmentum. So if I have substantia nigra here, it will be having the soma or cell bodies of the dopaminergic neurons, and they project to the striatum, to nucleus accumbens, and many others, as we've mentioned in here, olfactory tubercle and the limbic system area. All those are dopaminergic neurons in the midbrain, basically. Okay, let's continue. All right, let's continue. So dopamine does not cross the blood-brain barrier. That you should take note of it. All right. Functional roles of dopamine in the central nervous system. 1. Control of movements. For control of striatum. You can look at this. It controls movements by controlling the striatum, which modulates muscle tone and voluntary movements. Therefore, the deficiency of dopamine will cause Parkinsonism. Dopaminergic neurons, when they are deficient in the brain, they will cause Parkinsonism. Okay? The basal ganglia, you can recall, we talked about it. Let's continue. Dopamine induces vomiting, all types or all forms of vomiting, except that of the vestibular origin. Yeah, that which comes about due to balancing and the like. So, induction of all vomitings requires dopamine in the central nervous system. Dopamine inhibits prolactin secretion and stimulates secretion of gonadotropin-releasing hormone. We can see this. Dopamine inhibits release of prolactin. All right. Retina also contains some inhibitory dopaminergic neurons. This is another point to talk about. The retina and dopamine and schizophrenia. This is a disease. A schizophrenia type of psychosis involves increased levels of D2 receptors. Dopamine 2 receptors, when they increase, we shall see schizophrenia, a type of psychosis. We shall talk more about this but you need to know it, dopamine and schizophrenia. Okay? So now we've gone to serotonin secreting cells. Yes, in the brain, serotonergic neurons have their cell bodies in the brain stem, and they project to portions of hypothalamus, limbic system, neocortex, and the spinal cord. These four, hypothalamus, limbic system, this is part of the limbic system, and neocortex and spinal cord, they receive projections of the serotonergic neurons whose cell bodies exist in the brain stem. Non-neural cells that contain serotonin are blood platelets having highest concentration. Okay, we have the mast cells, we have the GIT enterochromorphin cells, enterochromaffin cells. We know these cells are in the gastrointestinal system and the myotic plexus. All these are secreting. They're secreting. I think this is myotic plexus, but these are secreting serotonin also. Platelets, they secrete the 5-hydroxytryptamine, important in their activities. Functional roles of serotonin. The functional roles of serotonin in the central nervous system. First, it regulates carbohydrate intake and hypothalamic releasing hormones. Epinephrine and serotonin both are involved in food intake and control of body temperature. 2. Serotonin inhibits impulses of pain sensation in the posterior gray horn cells. Okay? Yeah, this is true. Hallucinations. A drug called LSD is hallucinogenic. You need to research more about this, but it is true. It is hallucinogenic. It stimulates the serotonin release using stimulates serotonin release, so causing hallucinations. Okay? Depressions of mood will require serotonin. Let's continue to histamine now. Histamine secreting cells in the central nervous system. In the brain, histamine is released by neurons which have cell bodies in the posterior hypothalamus majorly, and the axons project to all parts of the brain, including cerebral cortex and spinal cord. That is histaminergic neurons. Okay? 9 neural cells that contain histamine are those of gastric mucosa and heparin-containing mast cells. You can see this, gastric mucosa and heparin-containing mast cells. All right. Functional role of histamine in the central nervous system. First, it is an excitatory neurotransmitter. 2, it is believed that histamine plays an important role in arousal and sexual behavior. Regulation of secretion of some anterior pituitary hormones, drinking, pain threshold, and sensation of itch. So histamine plays roles in all these: arousal, sexual behavior, regulation of secretion of some anterior pituitary hormones, drinking, histamine plays a role, pain threshold, and sensation of itch. Histamine is therefore very important. Let's now talk about the amino acid neurotransmitters. Excitatory amino acid neurotransmitters. These cause neuronal depolarization, and they include glutamate and aspartate. But the aspartic acid seems to be the chief excitatory transmitter in the cortical pyramidal cells. Okay, aspartic acid. This is an objective type question to come. Inhibitory amino acid neurotransmitters which cause neuronal hyperpolarization include GABA and glycine. Gamma-aminobutyric acid causes inhibition. Okay, so let's talk about glutamic acid. This is the most prevalent excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain and also sensory nerve terminals. Inotropic glutamate receptors are ligand-gated ion channel, which when stimulated increase conductance of sodium and calcium into the cell, leading to depolarization. Okay, inotropic glutamate receptors. When glutamate binds, glutamate is the ligand. When it binds, it causes increased conductance of sodium or calcium into the cell, causing depolarization of the membrane of that cell. Metabotropic glutamate receptors are serpentine G protein coupled receptors, SGCR receptors, SGP CR receptors, serpentine G protein coupled receptors. They stimulate the phosphorinositol turnover, and they play a role in synaptic plasticity, mainly in cerebellum and the hippocampus. Plasticity of the brain, neuroplasticity or synaptic plasticity. These are metabotropic glutamate receptors. So glutamic acid is very important in the central nervous system. Let's continue to gamma aminobutyric acid. It has several importances. And this is it is the major inhibitor neurotransmitter in the whole central nervous system, i.e. the spinal cord, the brainstem, the cerebral cortex, and cerebellum all use gamma aminobutyric acid to inhibit, neurotransmission. And GABA A receptors produce inhibition by increasing chloride conductance, as produce inhibition by increasing potassium conductance and by decreasing cyclic AMP activity, which decreases influx of calcium ions. So these are GABA B. GABA A, we've seen the increased chloride conductance. The overall effect of GABA receptors is inhibition. So GABA B will use potassium conductance and decrease cyclic AMP activity. The GABA C receptors are exclusively present in the retina. These are GABA C receptors. This A should be something like a subscript, but it's the same. You should know we have GABA A, GABA B, and GABA C receptors. Glycine. Glycine is also an inhibitory neurotransmitter found primarily in the gray matter of spinal cord and brainstem. And it produces direct inhibition, call it postsynaptic inhibition in the spinal cord, and acts by increasing chloride ion conductance. Agents such as strychnine and tetanus toxin that antagonize the postsynaptic inhibitory action of glycine will produce convulsions and muscular hyperactivity. So this is a drug and this is a toxin of tetanus. Clostridium tetani produces a toxin which antagonizes postsynaptic inhibitory action of glycine. So the effect is continued stimulations causing convulsions and hyperactivity of the muscles. Let's talk about now neuropeptide transmitters. Neuropeptides, they have a mechanism of action which I can talk about as they can alter ion channel function and modify cell metabolism or gene expression, and these actions can be sustained for minutes, hours, days, and presumably even longer. So they alter ion channel function, modify metabolism or gene expression. Those are neurotransmitters, neuropeptides. The types of neuropeptides, we said, we have neuroactive peptides, for example, hypothalamus. These include releasing hormones from hypothalamus, such as thyroid-releasing hormones, thyroid-releasing hormone, the luteinizing hormone-releasing hormone, and somatostatin. All these are neuroactive peptides. We have pituitary peptides, for example, adrenocorticotropic releasing adrenocorticotropic hormone. Trophic hormone, we have beta endorphin, vasopressin, and oxytocin, which control the cardiovascular system. These are pituitary peptides. We talked about peptides acting on the gut and brain, and these include leucine, enkephalin, methionine, substance P, cholecystokinin, VIP, neurotensin, insulin, glucose, opioid, polypeptides. Opioids, you should take note of them, all right? And enkephalins. So opioids, these are peptides acting on the gut and the brain, Opioids, you see them somewhere in the spinal cord also. And 4 are the neuropeptides from other tissues. These include angiotensin 2, bradykinin, bombazine, and neuropeptide alpha and neuropeptide Y. So neuropeptide Y, we see it important in the about satiety, about food eating and appetite. Neuropeptide Y. Okay, let's continue. So you should not forget to subscribe. I know it's been long about the neurotransmitters, but that is it. It's a lot. Have a lot of neurotransmitters in the body, in the brain. So you like a video, share to other students to also enjoy, and subscribe for more and better videos. Okay, the Vid 7 Science Theater, thank you.